they did a data collection of all of the paternity test centers in America, they found that 32% of fathers who got a paternity test were indeed not the father of their children. Now, you got to take this with a grain of salt because these were the men who already had suspicions, but y'all not hearing me. This problem is so bad in Jamaica, it's about 70%. When the men's rights activists in Jamaica wanted to make it so that paternity tests were mandatory at birth, they said that they wouldn't allow it because it would cause too much femicide, meaning too many men would find out that their children are not actually their children and they would end up harming the women. They thought it was so bad that they shouldn't even make it a thing. In France, this problem is so bad that you're not even allowed to get a paternity test unless it's ordered by a judge. They said, and I quote, that it would destroy and destabilize communities if they had mandatory paternity tests at birth. We literally have access to the alien technology that allows us to make sure that every father is actually providing for children that is biologically theirs, and our states and governments are going, nah. Because that would mean women would have to be accountable for the decisions that they make. And if you have this conversation with some women, they will really act offended. All I'm going to say is I never seen somebody wearing real diamonds afraid of a diamond test.
That's real talk. You know, that's real talk. This is something we've been advocating for the last 5 years in the black male political agenda. Mandatory DNA testing at birth. You know what I mean? And we do it because, you know, much as we like to thump our chests, every man, you know, is not going to be able to have the wherewithal to require one, to demand one. You know, you might be a kid having your first baby with this girl. You know, there's a million different scenarios where somebody isn't just going to be, you know, going to have the capacity to require that. And any man that's ever had a kid where your mother and grandmother and her family are all in the room when this baby comes out, there's a lot of social pressure that not everybody can own up to. I mean, we can talk a lot of shit online about what we would do, but when you're standing in that room with this girl who just gave birth, you know, not everybody's going to be able to have the capacity to do it. So we need to have mandatory testing. But on the other end, I really appreciate this brother putting this out there because, you know, it was clear, it was concise. And he laid out some of the evidence we've been talking about for years over on this side of YouTube. So I was glad to see it put together, you know, in just a few words. But this is also the work Carnell Smith has been doing for years. Shout out to that brother. I've had him on my show a couple of different times, even in the last month. So shout out to him. But this work needs to continue because society is comfortable with letting men pay the freight on, you know, kids that aren't even theirs. And if you make the mistake of actually signing the birth certificate, it's a wrap. Much of the time, even if you prove the child isn't yours, you still have to pay. So 18 years of child support or whatever is taxing, but it's particularly unfair when you're not actually the father. And of course, women are not necessarily interested in justice as far as that's concerned. They're interested in self-preservation. I just posted on my YouTube page on the community tab one of the recent videos by that brother named Darwin. His last name escapes me at the moment, but he did an excellent show on this very topic, and he highlighted from a panel discussion he was on the hypocrisy, even from black women who believe and support the idea that men shouldn't be held accountable for babies that aren't theirs. They still, within the course of the discussion, turned around and blamed the men who aren't the fathers. You know what I mean? So it's necessary that we got to push for this. Now, here's the thing. With the black male political agenda, and it doesn't just apply to this point, it applies to all of them. Even if we can't immediately get policy on any given issue, writing the issue out and outlining the policy we want gives people, black men in particular, but men in general, the opportunity to at least understand the issue if they've never thought about it before, and act accordingly. You know what I mean? So if you don't get the policy you're looking for, or we haven't gotten it yet, hell, we may never get it, you can still operate in response to the issue itself. So whether it's going abroad as a passport bro, whether it's going IBMOR, whether it's or going monk altogether, However you choose to deal with the possibility of paternity fraud, the fact that you're dealing with it is really the goal of the agenda. It's not just to outline policy. That's the obvious aspect of it. It's also to outline that this is an issue seriously enough to deal with yourself. So, wearing condoms, making sure that you're getting, you're being careful, whatever your strategy is, at least take the issue seriously enough to have a strategy. And that is the real underlying goal for all of these agenda items. To what extent we may not be able to get policy right away, have you taken steps in your own individual life to account for these issues happening to you? You know what I mean? And so in regard to this, knowing that women by and large are not going to support this. And anytime the conversation comes up, they don't. They cape for each other, they advocate for each other, and they're happy to do it at your expense. So have you planned for this? Have you dealt with it? The brother talked about Jamaica. There were some other studies in Nigeria, and of course here in the US. All of it points to the fact, and he actually added in France as well. I hadn't run across that one. But, none of these countries really want to push that policy. And I think France's response to that, as he laid out, was exactly why. Societies would collapse under holding women accountable. So they're going to resist doing it until men apply enough pressure to where it's a necessity. But that pressure doesn't mean you're necessarily holding signs in the street. As we're seeing society and women in particular responding to the pressure of men withdrawing socially, in terms of labor, in terms of dating, in terms of marriage, as men have withdrawn, that is a form of protest. That is a form of pressure. And people are responding to it. This is why a lot of the topics discussed in the Black Manosphere have gone global. Because the issues themselves are global, and as more men hear it and start to agree with it, there's pressure. So we need to keep that up. Women may get in the streets and protest. That's their form of applying pressure. Men don't have the same kind of opportunity. I mean, we can do it, but there's no social empathy for us. And that's one of the ways that street protests and whatnot, that's one of the ways that works. Now, economic protests, withdrawing your dollars, that works. And that works for men as well if we can organize well enough to do it. But this new kind of social pressure that I'm talking about is men withdrawing from social participation. And that withdrawal is a form of protest and does apply enough pressure to the point where people are responding. Matter of fact, this last presidential election, one could argue, was heavily dependent on the pressure we provided. Why? Because on the left, they dismissed men's issues altogether. But the right, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, picked up those issues and ran with it. Part of how Trump got into office was catering to men's voices, men's concerns. Like it or not, that opened up an entirely new door for future political, electoral campaigns. Now men are on the map with an articulated voice about their concerns. This was something that Trump's son alerted him to, and he took advantage of it to the detriment of the Democrats, who decided to ignore men, rolling with the policy that we're just toxic. That cost them an election. You can bet that whether it's incremental or major in the next upcoming elections, both parties will be taking men seriously. I mean, we all know the Democrats just dropped over 20 million to try and figure out how to address men's issues, to understand what men are talking about. That comes about because of the pressure we've applied. So we can't let up. We can't let up. We apply pressure in our own way. We protest in our own way. And in regard to this issue of paternity fraud, which the courts want to ignore, which the government wants to ignore, men are not going to ignore it. And this may very well, as it seems to be, become a global issue. And I think, what we've seen in the poor man's broadcast a moment ago is outlining that very thing. This is becoming a global issue, and there are others, but this is a major one. We're tired of just accepting what we're told to respond to, and we're withdrawing from doing so. I'm seeing men as young as 12, 13 years old, all the way up through 80, who are abandoning their social role in families, in relationships, in society in general, because they've been made pack mules, not thanked, not acknowledged. I mean, men don't even require much but some respect, but there's no respect given. And in fact, we're told that we're toxic and monstrous. So yes, the withdrawal has many roles. It's not just laziness. It's not just abandonment. That's how many feminists want to categorize it, or pundits, societal leaders. But with enough pressure, they begin to understand it's not just about laziness at all. It's actually a new form of protest, or at least a form of protest that is being reintroduced to a population that may have long since forgotten about it, because men haven't banded together to say very much in quite a while. And it's happening. So I'm happy to see it. And I think we need to keep pushing it because it's important. Because it's absolutely important. You have people that have grown comfortable with society picking up the tab for, them doing whatever they want as it pertains to having children, knowing that they can live off of society's largesse. But secretly, what people don't want to say out loud is that men are the one, even through taxes, that pay for all of this. And then they're doubly hit by going into, court and being given child support regardless of the parentage of the child. And we know that there are cases where men have literally been thrown in jail and given, told they're on backlog in terms of child support payments for kids that not only aren't theirs, but for relationships that never happened. I mean, there was a recent gentleman, I don't know about recent, several years ago, where the woman just put his name down. And he ended up being arrested for it. So, I mean, these kind of issues, I think men are getting tired of, and we're starting to push back. And this is something that I'm starting to see and I'm happy about. In the last 5 years, I've watched it move from just complaints about dating and sex, and now it's pushed into politics. And this is something I've been wanting to see. And I'm not the most political person in the world, but it's plain to see that that's the direction it needed to go. And I'm watching black men do it. And I'm proud. I may not agree with how everybody does it, but that's not been my focus. My focus has been getting men to articulate themselves, to use the vocabulary we're creating that best suits our experience so we can be clear about what our issues are. And take those articulations into the political realm. Once I saw enough of that, then I'll probably get into the discussions about politics and what I think. But right now, in the last 7 or 8 years, my concern has just been getting men to be more vocal. And now I'm seeing it happen. You know what I mean? Because 8 years ago, this video we just watched, you would have had to watch it on a channel like mine or BGS's. We'd have charts and statistics up. We have examples of articles from around the world. And we literally did this, talking about the various rates of paternity fraud in different countries. Now you're seeing people casually talk about it, people who are unlettered or at least not at full-on academics. And that was the goal, to get this stuff enough into the black male mainstream that brothers could articulate it in casual speech. And so now that I'm seeing that, I'm saying there's an opportunity for us here to keep pushing, and it's going to spread to other issues. So if you're not familiar with what other issues are on the table, again, go through the Black Male Political Agenda. The link is in the description, and look through the various items. This is not something I wrote. This is a product of the Onyx Report community. And over 40,000, mostly black men, articulating policies that suit their interests. Right now, it's the 19-point Black Male Political Agenda. And you can find that pretty easily if you Google it. You can also put my name in with it, yours truly, Dr. T. Hasan Johnson, and you will see in detail what we are concerned about. Because these things need to be addressed, and they're finally starting to get their due in terms of, their public acknowledgement. But yeah, so we can't wait on society to decide that it's unfair. We damn sure can't wait on women to include it in their politics. They've made it clear that they're not going to address this issue unless they're backed into a corner and forced to address it. They're not going to be accountable until they're backed into a corner and forced to be accountable. And they are happy to use you in lieu of accountability as long as it's comfortable for them. Right. And then society will turn around and shame us for even challenging an unjust charge of false parentage if it means that the government doesn't have to pay for it and a man will. I mean, all of these things need to be called into question. So from China to Australia to, in Canada, you're seeing men starting to really push back against these narratives. So I hope you'll join us in doing so. Continue to apply pressure and help us to expand this vocabulary, expand our set of issues, come up with policy ideas, articulate frustrations, and really begin to push for an unveiling of the relationship between policy and social behavior in terms of how people act, what people do. In other words, my book deals with how policy has impacted Black women's social behavior and their treatment of men and boys. We need to keep pushing along those lines to make clear that men's treatment, or I should say mistreatment, will no longer be tolerated. And we are politicizing to the extent that we're analyzing how we're treated, where it comes from, why, and how it should be reversed. So I thank you for taking this time to listen, and I look forward to reading your comments. All right. Peace.